Hello everyone and welcome. First of all, I want to start by saying to all the pianists, jazz musicians and woodwind players who've been writing to me over these last few weeks, please do feel included in this next lecture and I look forward to our continuing conversations. I realise that on the surface it really sounds like I'm going to be delving into very specific string playing techniques, and whilst this is true, I really do believe that questions of articulation and the techniques used to achieve this are still very important and open to all of us. I absolutely believe we learn from each other all the time, so I'll be very interested to hear your thoughts and experiences. I'd like to share with you a couple of stimulating and helpful experiences I had when I taught in Lugano at the Conservatorio Svizzera Italiana. I linked up with the bassoon professor and we gave a combined cello and bassoon class. We had a fantastic discussion about the differences in how string and reed players start their sound and how we articulate sound. Also, how we sustain sound and create vibrato. It was certainly a real eye-opener to my cello students and helped them look at their own techniques in a new light. And the bassoonists felt similarly. These students also improved in their ensemble work because they had this new understanding. On another occasion, I arranged a class with the professor of voice, and again we learned from the singers how they start their sound, how they articulate and breathe. It had such a great effect on the cellists, and honestly the singers were also amazed at the level of sophistication necessary for cellists to play staccato and use vibrato. An all-round boost to how we were all learning and how best to play together. So today's lecture, which is staccato and vibrato. I'll start by talking about staccato and I'll tell you some of the common problems I hear from students. I find it difficult to get the bow to bounce in a controlled way in spiccato. I get very tight playing fast staccato passages and especially in a moto perpetuo section, for example. I struggle to get a clear spiccato sound. I can't control my ricochet. As you'll have gathered from my previous lectures, I'm very fond of explaining the physics in what we really do because I believe we need to understand our body and all the tools we use. For string players to understand how we can produce sound, staccato and spiccato, we first need to understand how our bow is made and how it works. First, from a block of wood, the head of the bow is carved into shape and the length is planed to make the stick. At this time, the stick is straight. Then, using a single flame, like a Bunsen burner from a science lab, the stick is moved along its length above the flame. Gradually heating the stick allows it to be bent into a curve. This curve is known as the camber. This bending process was the invention of François Tourte, possibly the greatest bow maker ever. He lived from 1747 to 1835. Before this time, the bow was cut to a curved shape. What this new method of heating and bending produced was a bow with more flexibility and more strength in a very specific direction. Horsehair is attached to the bow, knotted at the top and put into a little well. Then a tiny wedge holds it in place. At the heel, in the frog, the hair is threaded through the silver ferrule and then goes into a well, again wedged in. Now I'll explain how the curve of the bow is designed to work, its strengths and its weaknesses. In conjunction with the tension of the hair, the bow's strength is when the stick is bent directly towards the middle of the hair. I don't know whether you can see. If you bend it to the side, it's weak and the hair tension is uneven, more slack on one side than the other. With this design, the design of a so-called modern bow, with its curve towards the hair, when you add your weight to the stick, pushing it towards the hair and the string, the bow naturally tries to spring back. If you allow it to spring back, it will lift the hair away from the string. A Baroque bow, on the other hand, with its curve away from the hair, does the opposite. The more weight you add, the more it sticks to the string. You have to lift the bow to get away from the string. So, the design of the modern bow means that when you're trying to achieve a spiccato, providing we apply weight to the bow in the optimum manner and we don't suppress the natural springy tendency, the bow will jump and we will easily achieve a spiccato. So what is the optimum approach? As I explained, the strength and flexibility in the bow and its springiness are when the stick bends towards the centre of the hair. So to use the bow in the way it's designed, we need to place the bow with the hair flat on the string. All the hair must touch the string at the same time with the stick directly above the centre of the hair. If you approach the string at an angle, one hair touching first and then the others following, the bow will not work efficiently for sound production and for spiccato. Here's a way to understand it in action. It's what I call the bounce test. Hold the bow in a relaxed manner with the middle of the bow above the string. Holding the frog of the bow very lightly, let the bow fall to the string, allowing the frog to pivot in your hand. If the hair arrives flat on the string, the bow will bounce and continue to bounce, ricochet, many times until it runs out of energy, just like this. If you do this with the bow at an angle, the bow will bounce once or twice and then stop. This shows how naturally the bow bounces when it is applied correctly. So weight bending the stick, producing the spring back, creates the ability to bounce. The heavier the weight, the higher the bounce. Weight is not just the weight of the bow, but the weight you put into the bow. It's like the harder you throw a ball at the floor, the higher it will bounce. But critically, you have to be free enough in your bow hold to allow the bow to rise. Here's the higher bounce when I put more weight into it, compared to the lower bounce when I use less weight. As I said before, you must allow the bow to pivot in your bow hold. As you move back and forth, the fingers allow the bow this freedom. Golden rules are: don't grip. Have a structure, not a grip. Listen to the difference in sound when I play gripping the bow and without gripping. Let me show you how to create the right movement. Think of the first finger as the initiator of the movement. Be decisive. Let the movement go freely through the wrist. The direction of the movement is mostly diagonal, not just horizontal, from your top left to bottom right, pulling the bow into the string and then letting it bounce while you move back to the top left. Small movements are done just with the fingers, large movements, the bigger bounce, which would be a slower staccato rhythm. You'll still initiate from your first finger, but the wrist and forearm come into play. So watch again, the small, faster staccato and the larger one. You should experiment with just how few fingers you need to have touching the bow. In essence, you're giving the bow the maximum opportunity to pivot in your hand. The speed of the bounce. When you put your energy and weight into the bow and then restrict the height of the bounce, you'll feel your control of the speed. The more you restrict the height while still making the bow bounce, the faster you will go. It's like hitting a ping pong ball with the bat directly towards the table and then moving the bat progressively closer to the table. The bounce height is restricted and the ball hits the table with increasing frequency. Your first finger initiates the movement of the bow and also acts to restrict the height of the bounce. To practice this, start with a big bounce and gradually limit the height, making your movement smaller and faster. I want to emphasize that because of the way the bow works in staccato passages, we must not lift the bow or even be tempted to lift it. People commonly want to lift the bow because the bow is not bouncing. As I've explained, the bow cannot bounce naturally and efficiently unless the stick bends directly to the center of the hair and the hair is completely flat on the string. When to control every movement and when not to. In a very slow staccato, you can make a semicircle action for each note. First down bow, then up bow. Very deliberate. When you play fast, you can allow the bow to do much more of the work. When the bow is bouncing really well, you can even focus on giving impetus to the bow just every 4 notes, for example. If you listen to Jascha Heifetz, who had one of the greatest staccatos ever, he often rhythmically articulates every 4 notes, and it gives an amazing sense of speed. He often sounds even faster than he's actually playing. It's exhilarating. You can listen on YouTube to Heifetz playing Paganini's Moto Perpetuo. It's utterly amazing. Here's a tip for starting a staccato passage. For good control, it can be advantageous to start a staccato passage with the bow on the string. We start by adding weight to bend the stick, then release the weight as you make your first down or up bow. It can be harder to start or control the bounce when you start in the air above the string, but there are times, of course, we have no choice. Definitely harder. Where on the bow to bounce? Generally choose the middle of the bow or higher. Lower down, the bow has less space to pivot and the balance is wrong. However, for slower staccato passages, when you want a rougher sound, you might choose to play near the heel of the bow. Volume, dynamic, clarity. In a continuous staccato section, if you want to play louder, you'll need to use more bow. To keep the same tempo will require considerably more energy. The fast, close to the string staccato with little length of bow will be cleaner, but less loud. When you get really close to the string, you'll have the cleanest staccato of all. Another tip, practice a range of speeds as close to the string as possible. This is a really good way to improve your staccato. Bows and how much to tighten the hair. Following on from the understanding that the bow must bend to bounce, we can appreciate that an innately rigid stick will not be very helpful. A flexible stick is generally better. It's worth thinking about that when you are choosing a bow. Be careful how much you tighten your bow. Experiment with how much tension you need to get a good range of staccato. Bows vary. Every bow is different. Their rigidity and their point of balance is different. The depth of the frog varies. The amount of the curve. Even the difference when your bow hair is new to when it's stretched. As the hair stretches, the position of the frog moves further towards the end of the stick, and therefore the point of balance moves. We must adapt to this. Being aware of all these things, you'll more quickly find the best bounce point on your bow, and you'll instinctively move there when you need to. Ricochet. The control is very similar to staccato, by which I mean the speed of the subsequent bounces are controlled by your first finger. We also have a ricochet action in the fast passages where we bounce across several strings, a kind of split chords passage. In these cases, we need to give a strong first finger impulse with added impulses from the wrist. Do this at the start of each down and up bow set. The length of the stroke affects the volume of the sound. Fatigue. Tension in you is the first reason you'll get tired. Keeping your movements to a minimum helps. In long fast passages, changing which finger accompanies the first finger can also help. Fitness. Playing long moto perpetuo sections requires a unique fitness. For example, I find that when I'm to perform Elgar Concerto second movement, which has such long, fast staccato section, it's necessary to play through the movement at speed 2 or 3 times a day for many days before the concert to build fitness. Right hand, left hand coordination. The right hand should lead in almost all cases. The exception being passages that have changes of notes which require left hand to quickly move, what I call left hand rhythms. In these cases, I recommend leading with the left hand at the moments of those rhythms. When the left hand leads, it imperceptibly causes the right hand to wait for it while it reaches the next note, and thereby creates better coordination between the hands. Up and down bow staccato, on the string, repeated notes in one bow. This technique most often comes up when certain virtuoso repertoire is learnt, such as in Paganini or even in the Elgar I've just played. This is a difficult technique to teach because everyone who has a good up bow or down bow staccato seems to do it in a very individual way. And I've never found anyone who can explain exactly how they do it. It seems more like a nervous twitch than a studied technique. I can just give you some hints and tips and then leave you to search and experiment. No one seems to have developed a fast up bow staccato from practicing the action very slowly and building up to a fast tempo. Finding a tension in the right arm or wrist seems to be the general consensus. So you need to find a position with tension and don't worry if it's far from your normal relaxed state. Even the amazing Itzhak Perlman, who has a great staccato, can't explain how he does it, but he tells a marvellous story of how the great violinist Joseph Gingold was playing a concerto which had lots of up and down bow staccato. Eugene Izai, a giant of a musician and a giant of a man, was in the audience. He could be intimidating. He came backstage afterwards and said to Gingold, "What happened to the staccato?" Gingold said, "Sorry, Mr. Izai, I don't have a good staccato." Whereupon Izai says, "I'll give you one. Put your violin under your chin. Now put the bow on the string. Go!" Now I'm going to talk about vibrato. What effect does vibrato have on our sound? It warms or cools, elicits excitement, brings calm. It's always adding a quality. Fundamentally, vibrato must come from the heart. You must desire the beauty. Adding vibrato mechanically or automatically doesn't produce good results. If you ever taught a musical child from the early stages, you'll know there often comes a moment when they're desperate to play with vibrato, shaking their hand in any way they can to produce it. They desire that extra warmth and beauty, and vibrato seems their instinctive way forward. It's the same when people can sing with vibrato. It's just so beautiful. Vibrato brings heart to the music. If you unintentionally stop vibrating, even for a moment in a phrase, the heart goes out of the music. Of course, there are times where it's appropriate to play without vibrato, to have a stillness in the sound, to create a specific atmosphere. In Arvo Pärt's music, for example. Pärt talks about wanting his music to express love for every note, and in turn communicate the spiritual power that he sees as music's essential purpose. His pure music, the sound of tintabulation, is just one example that emphasizes how carefully we need to understand and use vibrato as performers. In order to be a faithful channel and communicator for the sounds of the great composers throughout the ages, you can understand why we have to learn a wonderful repertoire of different kinds of vibrato and how to totally integrate them into our music making. The fundamental movement. Let me first explain a little about the way our wrists work and why using them incorrectly can cause specific problems and difficulties for musicians. Have a look at these pictures of the anatomy of the hand and wrist. Look at the complex set of bones in the wrist. Notice how the tendons attached to the muscles run to the individual fingers. They pass through very narrow carpal tunnels in the wrists on their way to the fingers. The nerves in the hand go right up to our shoulder and beyond. We use the muscles in our forearms to pull the tendons, which in turn bend our fingers. Our fingers are like puppets on a string, just like this. Now let's do a little test together. Hold your arm out like me and balance your hand on your wrist like this. Make sure your wrist is not twisted in any way. Now move your fingers around and feel how easy that is. Now bend your wrist forwards like this and move your fingers again. You'll feel how difficult and uncomfortable it is. Bend your wrist back or to the side and it's the same. Now return to the balanced and straight position. Do you feel how easy that is? That's because the tendons are not having to pull your fingers through the tunnels around a corner. Incidentally, it's also the reason it's so hard for us to do actions like opening a jam jar. That twisting action is just not for us humans. Many conditions such as carpal tunnel syndrome and tendinitis are caused by people using their wrists in the ways that go against our physical design. Now to vibrato. To vibrate correctly, we shouldn't use a swiveling or rotational action like this. Your hand shouldn't swivel around a fixed point. Imagine how many thousands or millions of times you will twist and stress your wrist, the muscles, tendons and nerves, if you use this action day after day, year after year. This rotational action causes injuries such as tendinitis and wrist and muscle damage. Many people come to me with tendinitis problems caused by this type of vibrato. With rotational vibrato, it's extremely hard to vibrate continuously unless the tempo of the music is very slow, because if your hand is in one of the extreme points of rotation, it's almost impossible to put the next finger down in a good position. So you would either have to stop vibrating or use some kind of force. Instead, a healthy, efficient and flexible vibrato is created by a polishing movement like this, as if you were cleaning the fingerboard. A movement parallel to the fingerboard. It's what I call the parallel vibrato technique. To make the parallel vibrato movement, you use your whole forearm. Imagine your forearm as a tennis racket handle and the back of your hand up to the first knuckle as the head of the racket. Keep your wrist in line with the arm. Your fingers can then move freely up and down from that knuckle. Remember the test we did. This is a structure that is healthy, allows you the best control of your finger movements and easy control of the weight you apply to each finger on the string. You can see and feel your forearm involved in the vibrato movement with a hinge in your elbow. You always keep your wrist in the neutral, stress-free position. So let me show you how we set up the parallel vibrato movement. First, put your hand on the strings at a midpoint on the instrument. You'll see that my wrist is straight and my fingers are nicely curved and soft. Now start a gentle but large dusting movement, keeping the tennis racket position. While making sure you keep the feeling the same, slowly decrease the distance your left hand travels. Slowly add weight to a single finger. I would start with the second finger as it's nicely placed in the center of your hand, or the third finger because it's soft and flexible. You're decreasing the movement and adding weight until the finger becomes just about stuck on the string. That finger has to be very relaxed in its joints so that when the note is established, when the pad of your finger is relatively static, your finger and your hand remain relaxed and continue to move in a parallel direction along with the fingerboard. Your finger must be curved, not straight or bent in any way, as this enables the action to continue. Your hand should be relaxed enough for each finger to move independently. Make sure there is no locking together of knuckles in your hand. Make absolutely sure your thumb is moving with your arm, either away from the neck or slipping along the neck. Your thumb should be considered part of your arm, not involved with your fingers. Watching and feeling your thumb moving parallel to the neck is a great way to check your vibrato is moving correctly. When you're in the thumb positions, keep the same movement of your arm and the hinge in your elbow. Now, the vibrato movement of your hand is independent of whichever note you choose to play, as the vibrato stems from your arm rather than the rocking sensation around each finger. This way of vibrating allows you to play continuous singing phrases. It allows you to vibrate while playing a scale, stretches, shifts, and fast note passages. The quality and warmth in the sound is then really controllable. Even when you play fast passages, when you might think there's no time or need to vibrate, vibrato brings life to the music. By the way, a shift can be considered like one large vibrato. For example, playing a line of notes with a shift in the middle while vibrating continuously, the shift becomes a single movement of vibrato. Speed and size of vibrato. Here's a demonstration of the opening of the Brahms Sonata in F with 4 kinds of vibrato. First, slow and large, which feels quite a relaxed energy. Then a large and fast vibrato bringing excitement. Now a small and slow vibrato which gives a very pure and calm sound. And now a small and fast vibrato which sounds quite nervous and intense. Some tips. Find the softest feeling in your fingers, hand and arm. Imagine jelly. Remember what I said in the sound lecture. The least possible weight of left-hand fingers on the string produces the greatest resonance. It also allows the best vibrato. Here's some exercises you can try. Start with a big, warm, slowish vibrato, keeping the tennis racket structure. Accompany this with a deep sound with your bow. Gradually reduce the size of the movement until you come to a complete vibrato stop. Now try the same thing in reverse, starting with no vibrato, slowly increasing the size and the warmth of the sound, like increasing the flame underneath a saucepan, and build up to a big soft vibrato. Remember to keep as relaxed as possible. You can try it with scales with vibrato, keeping your arm moving throughout. And if you like, you can even keep the movement going when you're playing open strings. Make up any exercises you like, experimenting with different speeds and sizes of vibrato. It's interesting that the audible size and speed of vibrato is affected by how much sound we're making with the bow. When you play softly, the string hardly moves at all, so vibrato can be heard very easily. When you play loud and the string vibrates a lot, you need to use a bigger vibrato for it to be heard. This is something to be aware of as you're playing. Big, really fast vibrato can be hard to play in a relaxed way. The momentum is great and the change of direction requires energy. Be aware of this and remind yourself to relax wherever possible. Use as little left-hand weight on the string as will produce the desired sound. A question I'm asked: if I'm practicing vibrato and get a lot of tension in my left hand, should I stop immediately or try and relax while I'm vibrating? Stop as soon as you're aware of tension. Restart from the point of relaxation. And if tension comes back, try to identify where in your body it started. Concentrate on keeping relaxed in the area you identified. You may need to stop many times, but this is much better than playing through the tension. Tension is damaging, and soon your brain accepts it as normal, and from there you can easily become injured. Vibrato and open strings. Always be careful when a line of notes includes an open string. Vibrato should be adjusted so as not to make the open string sound obtrusive. As you'll know, when playing an open string, you can help it sound a little like it has vibrato by placing a finger on the note an octave above and vibrating. Vibrato with piano or wind instruments. Be aware of blending with the piano or wind instruments that don't use vibrato. For example, when the piano plays a phrase and you have an answering phrase. These are the moments to listen carefully and make clear decisions about your choice of vibrato. Using vibrato expressively. Vibrato is always an expressive tool, and we must always make use of it to bring strong and clear musical messages. Think about different ranges of vibrato for different styles of music. For example, for Bach, I choose a very subtle, small and almost inaudible slow vibrato for a purer sound. In Beethoven, I choose a bigger range, including times of nothing at all, sometimes an intense, small, very internalized vibrato. Also faster, sweet and delicate vibrato. Also impassioned, bigger vibrato, but never wobbly. Beethoven was too powerful for wobbly. Vibrato for romantic music is even more enormously varied. Contemporary music too. Remember, vibrato should always support crescendos by increasing speed and or size. Inversely, you can support your diminuendos by decreasing the speed and or size of your vibrato. In incredibly simplistic terms, as you use more bow speed, support it with more vibrato, and gradually less vibrato as the bow slows. Always remember that vibrato has to be an integrated part of your sound production, and that you must choose extremely carefully the moments when you don't use vibrato. Don't let these moments happen accidentally or without you noticing. One final point. Climaxes in musical phrases are enhanced by perfect preparation. An extra boost at the very last moment before the climax. It's exceedingly important to focus on your vibrato at this moment. Here's a section of Tchaikovsky that has several high points where I can demonstrate this. Once again, I hope you find lots of ideas to keep you stimulated and inspired in your practice time, and I look forward to hearing any questions you'd like to bring up. As lockdown continues, we are certainly on an emotional rollercoaster in my household. So at the request of my wife, I thought I might just finish with a moment of playing for you. I hope you all find moments of love, happiness, calm and release in your music making, and I hope you all stay safe and well.